The teacher said this boy would amount to nothing, and years later she was left speechless. This is a touching story. Jake was a 10-year-old boy, lively and curious, but with learning difficulties. In the small town where he lived, his teacher, Mrs. Johnson, had a fixed opinion. This boy will never be anybody. She said it openly to anyone who would listen, frustrated with Jake's constant mistakes and apparent inability to keep up with the class. Hearing these words repeatedly, Jake began to believe them. His father, a simple and hard-working man, always tried to encourage him, but Mrs. Johnson's words echoed louder in the boy's mind. His mother, on the other hand, never accepted the treatment Jake received. She firmly believed in her son's potential and went to great lengths to find ways to help him. Jake spent his afternoons in the small community library, where his mother would accompany him religiously. The librarian, Mrs. Smith, an elderly woman with a kind heart, soon noticed what was happening. "Jake, you are much more than you think. You just need to find your way of learning," she said once, placing a book of illustrated stories in his hands. And that's how Jake found his refuge in books, where words came to life, and his imagination could fly free. Despite the difficulties at school, Jake began to show a passion for drawing the stories he read. His school notebooks transformed into illustrated books, with vibrant characters and action scenes revealing latent talent. However, school continued to be a place of frustration. Mrs. Johnson saw no value in Jake's drawings, considering them mere distractions. One day during a parent-teacher meeting, Jake's mother confronted Mrs. Johnson. "My son may not learn conventionally, but that doesn't mean he has no value. You should encourage him, not destroy him," she said firmly. The tension in the air was palpable, and other parents who had been watching silently began to question the teacher's methods. Jake, witnessing the discussion from the hallway, felt a spark of hope. His mother believed in him, and that meant the world. But still, Mrs. Johnson's words weighed on his soul. He decided then that he would prove to everyone, but mostly to himself, that he could be someone. From that day on, Jake dedicated himself even more to his drawings. He spent hours in the library, learning about drawing and painting techniques, absorbing every detail from the illustrations in books. The librarian, Mrs. Smith, became a mentor, always encouraging Jake to explore his creativity. However, things didn't improve at school. Mrs. Johnson continued to despise him, and once confiscated all his drawings, throwing them into the trash in front of the whole class. "You should focus on your studies, not on this nonsense," she said with a stern expression. Jake felt his heart shatter, but something inside him refused to give up. Then a new art teacher, Mr. Roberts, arrived at the school. He soon noticed Jake's talent. During a class seeing the boy's hidden sketches, Mr. Roberts was impressed. "Jake, these drawings are amazing. Have you ever thought about entering an art contest?" Jake had never considered this possibility, but the idea ignited a new flame within him. With Mr. Roberts' support, Jake began preparing for a state art contest. His afternoons in the library became even more intense, with Mrs. Smith and his mother by his side, as he worked tirelessly on his masterpiece. The contest theme was dreams and realities, and Jake decided to create a series of illustrations telling the story of a young boy who overcomes obstacles to achieve his dreams, a story reflecting his own journey. The day of the contest arrived, and Jake was nervous but determined. When the judges finally announced the winners, Jake's name was called as the grand winner. The crowd applauded, but the most surprising reaction came from Mrs. Johnson, who was present at the event. She looked at Jake, mouth agape, unable to believe what she saw. After the contest victory, Jake's life began to change. News of his talent spread throughout the small town, and he was no longer seen as the boy who couldn't keep up with his studies, but as a young art prodigy. His confidence grew, and he began to dream of a future where he could live from his passion. School remained a challenge, however. Mrs. Johnson, despite being shocked by Jake's victory, didn't completely change her stance. "A contest doesn't prove anything. You still need to focus on your studies," she said, trying to maintain her authority. But Jake, now more confident, began to stand up for himself. "Art is also a form of learning, Mrs. Johnson." "And I'm learning a lot," he replied in a rare moment of confrontation. Mr. Roberts, seeing Jake's potential, encouraged him to continue participating in contests and consider a career in the arts. "You have a special talent, Jake. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise," he often said. Jake began sending his drawings to different contests and magazines, and soon some of his illustrations were published in a youth magazine. Meanwhile, at home, Jake's mother did everything possible to support him. She saved up to buy better art supplies and even arranged for a local artist, a family friend, to give Jake some private lessons. These efforts began to pay off, and Jake's talent refined even more. The relationship with Mrs. Johnson remained tense, but Jake no longer let it bring him down. He knew his path was different, but not less valuable, and in a way, this constant opposition made him stronger, more determined to prove his worth. By the time he was 15, Jake had won several art awards, and his illustrations were known not just in the town, but in other regions as well. His home began to fill with trophies and certificates, each representing an achievement and personal triumph. One day, an unexpected letter arrived in the mail. It was from a renowned art school in the capital, offering Jake a full scholarship. They had seen his work in an exhibition and were impressed by his talent and potential. Jake could hardly believe it. "This is a dream coming true," he said with tears in his eyes. His mother hugged him tightly, feeling that all the sacrifices had been worth it. The news spread quickly through the town. While many celebrated Jake's achievement, Mrs. Johnson remained skeptical. "He may have talent, but life in the big city is not easy. I don't want to see him come back defeated," she commented to other teachers. But Jake was determined to prove he could succeed, no matter where he was. On the day of his departure, the school organized a small farewell ceremony. Mr. Roberts gave an emotional speech, reminding everyone of the importance of believing in dreams and fighting for them. "Jake is an example of perseverance and talent. I am sure he will do great things," he said. Jake left for the capital with a heart full of hopes and dreams. The new school was a completely different world, with resources and teachers he had never imagined. The first few months were challenging, but Jake found support in his classmates and teachers who saw extraordinary potential in him. In one of his classes, he met Emily, a classmate who soon became his friend. Emily was talented and dedicated, and together they formed an inseparable duo. The friendship with Emily brought new energy to Jake, who found in her a study partner and a confidant. They spent hours in the school's studio, exchanging ideas and encouraging each other. However, not everything was smooth. Some students did not look kindly on Jake, a small-town boy, taking up space in the school. Malicious comments and disdainful looks were common, but Jake used these adversities as fuel to improve even more. One day, the school announced a big internal art contest, the winner of which would have the opportunity to exhibit their work in a renowned city gallery. Jake knew this was his golden opportunity. He dedicated himself intensely, often working late into the night, with Emily by his side for support. The piece he created for the contest was a series of paintings that told the story of his life, from the challenges at school to the discovery of his talent. Each painting was a window into his soul, and the last painting showed a boy standing, looking toward the horizon with hope. When the contest day arrived, Jake was nervous but confident. He presented his works with a passion that touched everyone. When the winner was announced, Jake's name echoed through the hall, and he felt a wave of emotions wash over him. The gallery was his. The exhibition at the gallery was a milestone in Jake's life. His paintings were acclaimed by critics and attracted the attention of several renowned artists and curators. He was finally beginning to be recognized for the talent he had fought so hard to show. Among the visitors to the exhibition was a middle-aged man with an elegant posture and an analytical look. It was Charles Mitchell, a famous art curator. He approached Jake and, after a long conversation, invited him to participate in an artist residency in Paris. The offer was irresistible, but Jake hesitated. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he confessed to Emily. "You've always been ready, Jake. You just need to believe in yourself," she replied with an encouraging smile. Jake accepted the offer, knowing this would be a unique opportunity to grow even more as an artist. Paris was a chapter apart in Jake's life. The city, with all its cultural and artistic richness, provided him with a transformative experience. He met artists from all over the world, participated in exhibitions and workshops, and his art evolved impressively. During his stay in Paris, Jake received an unexpected visit. Mrs. Smith, the librarian who had supported him so much, had saved up to visit him. "I always knew you would go far, Jake," she said, moved by seeing the young man's achievements. It was a moment of celebration and recognition of all the effort and love invested over the years. After 2 years in Paris, Jake returned to the United States as an acclaimed artist. His career was on the rise, and he wanted to share his achievements with those who had always believed in him. His hometown welcomed him with open arms, and a large exhibition was organized in his honor. Mrs. Johnson, now retired, was among the guests. Seeing Jake's works and the impact he had made, she finally understood how much she had underestimated that boy. She approached him with a mix of pride and regret. "You proved me wrong, Jake. Congratulations," she said with a genuine smile. Jake, with the maturity life had given him, replied, "We all learn from our mistakes, Mrs. Johnson. I thank you for being part of my journey." It was a moment of reconciliation and acknowledgement of how much he had overcome. Over time, Jake decided to use his experience to help other young people like him. He created a foundation that offered art classes and support to children with learning difficulties. He wanted to ensure no other child felt as he once did, worthless and without a future. The foundation quickly became a success, helping hundreds of children discover their talents and believe in themselves. Jake was a living example that determination and the right support could change lives. Mrs. Smith, now in her later years, became an honorary figure at the foundation. Her library was renovated and transformed into a cultural center where children and young people could explore reading and art. Jake continued to expand his career and foundation. He became a sought-after speaker, traveling the world to tell his story and inspire others never to give up on their dreams. His works were exhibited in various parts of the world, and he became a symbol of perseverance and overcoming obstacles. The friendship with Emily also blossomed, and together they created several collaborative works that gained international prominence. Jake never forgot his roots and always returned to his hometown for events and exhibitions, keeping alive the connection with the place where it all began. At a major international art event, Jake was honored for his contributions to the art world and his social work. During the ceremony, he gave an emotional speech, remembering all the people who supported him on his journey. His mother, Mrs. Smith, Mr. Roberts, Emily, and even Mrs. Johnson. "Everything I am today I owe to each person who believed in me, even when I doubted myself, and even those who challenged me like Mrs. Johnson helped me be stronger and more determined. The important thing is never to stop believing, never to stop dreaming," he said, with tears in his eyes. Jake's story is a powerful reminder that talent and perseverance can overcome any obstacle. He proved that with support and determination, it's possible to turn dreams into reality and inspire others to do the same. His life is a testament that no one should be defined by their difficulties, but by their ability to overcome them and create something extraordinary from them.